after I made my first hire, I had one of those oh crap moments. I'm responsible for somebody's salary.
Today, I'm talking to Larry D. West III. He's going to take us through how he started out in the corporate world, his journey into entrepreneurship, some of the failures he's gone through, the success he's having now, and the accounting firm that he has founded. Let's get into it. Good to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I certainly appreciate it.
So let's start off. What do you tell people when they ask you, what do you do for a living?
The short of it is I help folks hold on to more of their money, send less of it off to the government, and also give them financial visibility to help them make better business and tax decisions. And so that all translates into I'm just an accountant that loves tax and loves finance.
That means you're a business owner.
Yes. Yep.
And you own an accounting firm.
Yes.
How many employees do you have?
We're up to 4 employees with plans to hire one more. At one point, we were up to 6, and just by way of the current economy and some changeover, we're at 4, but plans to add one more pretty soon here.
Very good. Now we're in the same Vistage group. Now you've been in Vistage longer than I have. Tell me about your experience with being in a group and being in this kind of a setting.
When I first approached Vistage, I did it with a bit of skepticism because you hear about mastermind groups all the time and different things like that. Here's the value, though, and why I really love it and why my experience has been exceptional is the business component of it is absolutely there. But I think the best thing is you have a group of business owners, CEOs, executives that now have a space that they can talk through different things that they're experiencing in the business. A lot of times, especially when you're at that level, you can't necessarily talk to your fellow executives because that can create some inner turmoil. You certainly don't want to talk to any of the other staff about different hardships. And some of that is, financial hardships with the business. Some of that is relationship based and how do you effectively manage? How do you have your leadership style? And quite frankly, the personal stuff that happens in life. But now you've kind of got a group of folks that experienced it or they understand exactly where you are. And you can get some really valuable insights. And so the business mastermind side of it is valuable, but the relationship part for me has been the biggest value add.
I would say the exact same thing about relationships and reputation. And being in that group has been great for me to be able to build both and get the feedback for the activities that I need to be doing on a daily basis to increase both,
Exactly. And it gives you a perspective too, because sometimes we get so sheltered in our own industry that we think there's only one way of doing it. But now that we've kind of got a group of about 15 or 20 of us across multiple industries, we can grab little pieces from one another.
That's the truth. So this is called the High Performers Podcast. And so I like to talk a lot about what it takes being a high performer. And so let's just start off the question, what does that even mean to you? What do those words mean to you, high performer?
Yeah. I love that question. And I think it's one that gets thrown around quite a bit. But high performer from my perspective is someone who can actually come through and deliver on the things that you need them to deliver on. But they don't just hit the baseline, right? They take it a step further and they do so without necessarily having to be asked or prompted to do so. It's kind of ingrained in them. That's their nature. So when I look at our line of work and you think about accounting, most people would say, okay, perfect, bookkeeper. Cross T's, dot I's, put transactions where they need to go. But from a high performance perspective, it's someone who can do those things, but then they ask you questions. Hey, what's the nature of this expense? We have to evaluate whether it goes in this spot or that spot. Is there going to be a good ROI for you actually spending money in this particular area, whether it's equipment or service or something like that? And so high performance are folks who take it above the minimum and really bring everything full circle and push it past the finish line as well. You got to finish, right? When you get started, that's half the battle, but to pull it across the finish line, that's where you really cut your teeth.
That's for sure. Now, your firm, you not only, like you said, not only do bookkeeping, but you ask questions about like planning for the next year. So you're coming into the time that's the end of the year. A lot of people think of tax time as after the first of the year and, before April 15th. So this is the time when you're actually doing the most high performance service, the high leverage service for your customers, where you're doing a lot of planning for next year. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So 2 sides of that. Part of that is the tax planning side, because you're right. Quite often, what's going to continue to happen, January, February, folks are going to start to gather their stuff, take it to their CPA and accountant and say, hey, here's everything I had tell me what the damage is. And then they'll get a list of shoulda, woulda, couldas. Whereas right now, what we're doing, we're having conversations about how the year is gone all the way up until this point, how we expect it to end, so that we walk into April with no surprises. But more importantly, we're talking about what's going to happen Jan 1 of 2023. What are our growth expectations? Are there key drivers that we need to focus on in the business to help raise revenue? Are there other expense areas that we need to zero in on to cut? Talk about a recession nowadays. Are we in a good cash position, and how do we start to squirrel away things so that if the business does hit a rough patch, we can survive? So those are the kind of proactive conversations we're having on the accounting side. And then the same is true on tax. What deductions do we need to squeeze in before the end of the year and take advantage of? And how do we prepare for the changes that are happening in 2023 going forward?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your history, because you were also a professional speaker and you went on a speaking tour, correct? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, man. I'm laughing here a little bit because that for a brief part of my career, that's all I wanted to do was just travel and speak. And so early on, I did a couple of workshops, and what I used to do was talk mainly to young professionals about the transition out of college into the real world. Because you'll hear a lot of business professionals suggest that kids are coming out of college not necessarily work ready. Expectations don't line up with the reality of the work that they'll be doing. And then there's this sense of entitlement. We heard it a lot with millennials, and now we're hearing it a little bit with Generation X, or excuse me, Gen Z, and so on and so forth. So I used to want to travel around and do workshops to help get a lot of those students college ready. And I ran into John Maxwell's program, and did some training with John Maxwell, and got certified on that side of things. And then I also joined Toastmasters and did a couple of Toastmasters competitions locally, just to enhance the speaking side of things. And yeah, that's where I really started on the professional speaking circuit. So I had a couple of those lined up. I actually have, and it's a smaller community college, but I've actually done one commencement speech, which was like super, super exciting for me. But yeah, it was a good time.
How do you think that being a professional speaker affected this idea of high performance, personal development? Did it drive you forward? How did it work for you?
Yeah, it definitely drove me forward, right? Because a few sides to that coin there. One, just to be a speaker within itself, um, you can't be status quo. You can't be dull. You can't be laid back, especially if you want to spark action, you want to spark motivation. Essentially, you have to, your presentation is everything, and that has to be facilitated in terms of how you show up, your mannerisms, and how you do things, as well as the actual slide deck if you're using one of those as well. And so for everything that I did around the speaker circuit, it was a question of, how do I get people to have the passion that I have? How do I say words and articulate things in a way that sparks the motivation that they need to actually take action? Because I think a lot of us would agree, whether it was a commencement, whether it was a convocation or something like that, if the speaker was dull, doesn't matter what the message was, we just weren't getting it.
That's the truth. Now, whenever you're making a speech, whenever you're passing on information, you're transferring your emotion. Like you said, you want them to have your passion. So how do you, when you're transferring that passion, you don't always just live at a high passion day. There's ups and downs, things happen. How do you personally deal with days whenever you don't feel that passion, or you don't feel what you're trying to push over to the crowd, or any, even because this goes through sales, it goes through, and you're selling internally to your people and your staff, the rest of your executive team. How do you personally deal with it whenever you don't have that passion? You have to kind of like manufacture it inside your body.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is a perfect solution for everyone, but I've somehow developed this mechanism of a switch in terms of turning it on and turning it off. I never want to walk into a situation and have whatever baggage I'm carrying bleed over into the audience and give them that experience. So even if it's the heaviest thing that I've just dealt with, there's a switch where I essentially turn that off and I deliver at the highest level to my audience, or as high as level as I possibly can. Because whether they have paid to be there or they're there by their own accord, essentially they're given the most valuable thing, which is time. And I don't want to cheat them out of that time. And so I turn off that personal side. I deliver that content in a way that is as effective and efficient as possible. But that also means when the switch is turned off, man, it's a drain, and there's some recovery that's needed.
For sure. Do you do preparation beforehand as far as like being able to turn on this switch and turn off this switch? Personally, I kind of practice. I have my own meditation practice, and that's a big part of it. Do you have anything like that that you do kind of on a daily basis?
No, but I've been working on establishing some of those habits, especially meditation. Now, I haven't gotten into it, but it's certainly one of my aspirations. The thing that I do now, and you'll notice when we first got on, I had these on at first, right? I take my glasses off, and the reason I do so is because when I'm looking at crowd, audience, or what have you, I don't want those distractions to really bleed through. So one of the things I do, I make sure I know my presentation top to bottom. I may not know every single word that's on that slide deck, but I know the concept around exactly what I'm talking about. Have the conversation around those particular concepts and make sure the point I'm trying to get across actually comes across. But I take the glasses off and I just kind of flow, and it puts me in a zone. I don't have to see, different facial expressions that may alter how I do things. Because while I think my presentation is the best thing in the world, the person in the front row may be going through some things and they're totally uninterested. If I see a downer on their face, I may inadvertently think that the presentation is horrible. So I like to just kind of keep that same energy and maintain it. I take the glasses off, man, and I get to work.
That's great. It sounds like you've made yourself like a physiological trigger to whenever you take them off. Oh, here we go. I'm going into my thing.
Yeah, it's like Superman in and out of the booth.
I love it. So
Yeah.
you mentioned a little bit ago management style.
Hmm.
How would you describe your management style?
Oh, yikes. I don't even know if there's a good technical term or definition. What I will say is it's evolving. When I first got into this space, and by space I mean owning a business, essentially my thought was, hey, I'm going to have a couple of clients. I'm going after lifestyle. I'm not growing a firm, if you will. I'm just an independent consultant. And that has since evolved into an actual business where I've had to hire people. And you talk about growing pains, never having had to really be responsible for people at such a high level. The management style makes a huge difference. Now, I'm more relaxed and relaxed and laid back to where I'm not aggressive. I'm not up in your face. I'm not micromanaging. I just kind of expect folks to come in and do their thing. And that just hadn't translated well with some folks and some personalities. So I've had to alter that management style a little bit more to be more clear and transparent of what expectations are and not apologetic for setting those expectations. Being able to call people out when they don't necessarily meet the expectations and have the difficult and uncomfortable conversations, which I will say, side plug to Vistage, that's been a huge value add for being in that group, is setting the foundation of how do you facilitate that difficult dialogue and those difficult conversations to make sure the performance is there. You can still have EQ, emotional intelligence, and still be a good person, but you also still have to maintain the standard for the firm.
That's for sure. And I love the way that you said it, not being apologetic. That was a big thing I had to break through of constantly apologizing for asking people to do what I need them to do. And
Hmm.
they really, humans just really respect you a lot better, a lot more whenever you say, this is what I want from you.
Yes, and be direct on under no uncertain terms. And it's valuable for a few things. One, it sets the expectation and makes it very clear what's expected. And then when at the moment that it's not met, that's an opportunity to say, hey, I asked for A, you delivered B. Let's talk about those differences. And if that consistently happens, then we have to take other action. But more importantly, it also sets the foundation for I asked for A and you delivered A or A plus. Let's talk about reward and making sure people feel valued for going above and beyond to deliver.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go back and talk about your personal habits some. Do you have any? I personally have like I mentioned, meditation, been getting back into the gym, eating right. There's a lot of things about health. We've been talking about health
Yeah.
and really being prepared because what I found is you can try to be a high performance person and you're running a car, say a high performance car, you're running it on terrible gas, you're going to
Mhm.
wind up eventually with some terrible performance. What do you do to fuel up your tank to stay in a high level?
Prior to us getting very detailed and doing some different things that have really been really focused on health, I think I was doing things that were poor habits. I should say it that way, but I wasn't necessarily getting poor results, right? And so that would mean I'm up late. right? One,
Yeah.
two, 3 in the morning, finishing things. I'm right back in the office at 7 because I'm running. I've got the energy to do it.
Hmm.
Inadvertently, that led to crashes. Inadvertently, that led to making careless mistakes that shouldn't have been made. And that also completely threw off health and sleep patterns. We've started this 21-day challenge, essentially getting rid of all the bad stuff, sugar being one of those main things. But it's actually kind of sparked different habits. The amount of sleep and the quality of sleep that I've gotten just in the last 2 weeks alone has been amazing when you compare it to the last 2 years, right? And so this has become a staple in terms of what I do, and it's really just about being more conscious um, in terms of not just the health and what you put in your body, but just being more conscious of the decisions that we make and the impact that it has. And the same is true across the business side, right? And so our last couple of hires, I think, are just phenomenal, and they're going to blow it out of the water. But we were more conscious in those decisions, more conscious in our hiring practices, and the same again, I think, bleeds through on the health side.
Yeah, that's for sure. The health of your business, the health of your body, the health of the executive team, it all kind of blends in. You know,
Yep.
you can't really take one thing out and just say, "Well, I'm just really good at this thing, so everything's going to be good." Doesn't work that way because everything affects everything. So let's talk about some of your goals, what you're moving towards, and your why. So you're a business owner. So
Mhm.
I'm sure you didn't start this business just to have. You mentioned at first you want to just be you, and I guess you realize you really need to build a team in order to really grow.
Yep.
So what are some of your goals that whenever you started to say, "Hey, I'm not getting it just on my own. I need to build a team." What are some of the goals that pushed you to start building a team?
Yeah, there were a few things there. The first one was really in terms of legacy. And this is from the business side, but it also bleeds through on the personal side now. So as you know, I've got 2 young kiddos, and I think a lot about um, what am I trying to teach them? What am I trying to demonstrate for them? What am I trying to showcase for them? And so when I think legacy, it's not a matter of having a business or having something to hand down to them. I think legacy in terms of teaching them that if you want something and you want to make something your own, you can absolutely go out there and get it. And so whether that means inadvertently teaching them this entrepreneurial side of things, that could be the case. But I want to make sure I leave a legacy of you all don't have to settle for status quo. Look at what dad was able to do with the resources that were there at the time and what that turned into. That means that you could absolutely do it as well. So that's really a primary driver, especially when we talk about why. But then the other side, after I made my first hire, I had one of those oh crap moments. I'm responsible for somebody's salary.
Yeah.
And so it's one thing if I don't pay myself and I can figure out different resources, but when other people are now relying on you for that paycheck, the hustle mode definitely kicks in. So from a goal perspective, I certainly want to make sure we grow, we continue to grow our firm, but we continue to add resources that make the deliverables that we give to the client phenomenal and something that they can't just get at any accounting firm, but that the resources that we have internally for our staff, whether that's the financial resources or what have you, are there and available for them. So those are definitely two things that I carry with me.
Those are great whys. Now you're an entrepreneur and you're a business owner, but I kind of feel like from your story, if you'll share it with us, you almost got like pushed into entrepreneurialism from your not good experience in corporate America. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, it's a. I'll give the Cliff Notes version because we had the longer presentation. So essentially, I worked for a traditional CPA firm, and I had made huge contributions to that firm. The our industry at the time, and even still to an extent now, was going through this shift of not everyone wanted to stay stuck in compliance work, and by that I mean tax prep work. Because when you look at CPA firms and tax shops, essentially your life from mid-January all the way through April is insane. We're talking hours on end, just doing compliance work, tax prep, making sure deadlines are met. And then the same is true when we get to extension season. And so a lot of the folks in the industry were moving away from that and they were getting into what's called advisory work. And essentially that's another way for saying proactive tax planning. And we'll talk about advisory work on the accounting side because that transition hasn't been made yet. But certainly on the tax side, they wanted to get into tax strategy, tax planning, and things like that. Well, I led the charge for that particular firm in terms of transitioning to the consulting space, to the tax planning space, and did a ton of work. And the one thing that I asked for was if we could have some type of consideration for ownership. Now, if you know about CPA firms, and this is true for a lot of professional firms as well, well, you can't necessarily have ownership in those firms unless you have that particular license or designation. And so I understood that. I went to my managing partner and proposed a partnership. I said, hey, I have this new market that I think we can tap into. Here's the entire business plan for how I think we can do it. Here's what the target is going to be. And this is what I think the projected revenue could be years 1 through 5. He mulled over it and ultimately said no. And for me, I was like, well, if I just help turn our consulting department into a premier part of our firm, and I'm the only one handling all of the consulting clients here, it's very, very clear you're not going to give me any level of ownership at all. Why not just go out and do it on my own? And so that's essentially what I did. They didn't like the strategy. They didn't like the type of clients. They didn't like the market. So I'm out here proving exactly what I suggested.
I love it. What would you say to other people that might be in some sort of a corporate, or they're working for somebody and they're in the same situation that you were in, and they don't feel like they're getting the value, or the value that they're giving is not coming back to them? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I say take a really hard look and take make a decision in terms of what you ultimately want out of life. For some of us, we like to play it very safe, right? And so the comfort and security of being in the corporate environment, because we know the paycheck is going to hit like clockwork on the 1st and 15th. We know that we've got benefits lined up, barring some crazy economic events, we know that we're covered, and there's security there. But the reward on the other side may not be exactly what you want out of life, because what you're actually looking for is freedom, flexibility, like myself, legacy, and a few of those other things. And if the trade-off that you're willing to make in terms of sacrificing those things, not achieving them, in exchange for the comfort and the salary, if that's worth it to you, then perfect, fine, stay put. But if you start to look at your why, and you start to look at the things that you really want, and you see that the writing is on the wall, the opportunity for you to go out and do it on your own, I say, why not try it? Because I'd rather try it and fail, which I've had a ton of those, and then live with those failures and learn what I could do differently, than to live with regret and say, hey, I shoulda, woulda, coulda. Those essentially will get you to a point in life where you look back and you start to say, I'm too old to do this. I don't have enough money to do this. I should have done this when I was in this, and that position. And I don't like those kind of uncertainties in life. I'd rather know for sure that I failed, and I failed on my account, and not necessarily at the hands of someone else.
Yeah. They say that entrepreneurs start 10 businesses before they find the one that actually kicks off, or there's a ton of phrases about that. Most businesses fail in the first couple of years, and that's why you got to start 10 of them to even get one to take off. Let's talk about some of the failures. I know I've had plenty that didn't take off. They go for the first year and you can't really scale them. You get into too small of a boat, and you can make as much as you possibly can in this little tiny opportunity. Talk about some of the ones that didn't go that great for you.
Yeah, well, I've certainly had a few of them. I was talking about one the other day, and so this was more when I was getting started on the speaker circuit. I started the company. It was called Elite Young Professionals, EYP, and I thought this was going to be the one. I was saying to myself,
don't we always think it's going to be the one?
Yeah, and I convinced myself. Where I was talking, I said, well, look, millennials are the largest population since baby boomers. We got a ton of those. We're right in the heart of a lot of them coming out of school. That being college and or grad school, perhaps the most educated generation in terms of attaining those degrees and professional degrees and things like that. So my market is huge. There aren't a lot of people talking to this particular audience. And so I've got a message that would come through. I'm one of them. We're gonna get contracts with Pepsi, Snapple, Toyota. They're gonna bring me in. All I got to do is establish these HR contacts, and I've got it. No.
No.
Right.
I loved it when you said that's all I have to do. All I have to do is this, because I've done that so many times. Oh, all I have to do is this one thing. And it's never one thing. It's all of the things, all of what you have to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just think, and I hear so many people too say is if I could just capture this percentage of the market, that means my revenue would be this, or if I could just get this many deals. And it's like, hey, I definitely get it. If all I had to do was that one thing. Yeah. But that was a huge setback, I'll tell you, and a huge failure because I've thrown a lot into it. But I also looked at it. I see a lot of missteps. I was more concerned about the brand and image than I was about the actual delivery. And there's something to be said about brand and positioning. That stuff is important and that stuff is valuable. But if the delivery isn't there, not understanding what my core audience wanted to see, because I thought the audience were going to be staff that I got to work directly with. When the audience is really staff that I got to work directly with. When the audience is really HR director, or how do I get through and talk to the HR director, or how do I get through and talk particular things? That's my audience. So I never really understood management at that point. Particular things. That's my audience. That was a huge. I never really understood that why that company didn't really take off and go now. But that was a huge. Man, I got a bunch more contribution to why that company didn't really take off. This wasn't so much of a failure, but more of one of those things that you go into and you say, "Hey, I can do that. Why not?" So EYP was author, self-published some books. Well, I'll say this too. I'll preface this with saying, this wasn't so much okay. So one book sold failure, but more of one of those things that you go into and you say, "Hey, I can do that. Why not?" Of a book. So self-published. I was like, okay, well, I wrote this great book. Self-published some books. It's phenomenal, and all I have to do is put it on. All I have to do again. All I have to do is put it on Amazon. Self-publishing. They went okay. So one book sold 100 copies. I don't have to hold inventory or anything like that.
Hey, that's more than mine.
Post it. People are going to love it. But let me tell you, the hustle to sell 100 copies of a book. No, my. I was like, okay, well, I wrote this great book. It didn't quite go that way. It's phenomenal. Self-publishing books. All I have to do is put it on. In fact, I think it was 101. All I have to do is put it on Amazon. I'm self-publishing, so I can do print on demand. I don't have to hold inventory or anything like that. I'm just going to post it. People are going to love it, and it's going to fly off the shelf.
What you're doing now.
No, a few things really came out of that. What I do now, it didn't quite go that way. Revolves around strategy, self-publishing books, and I sold planning. In fact, I think it was 101 each of those copies. I was did not have enough strategy or planning going into it on the front end. And certainly didn't have enough strategy on the execution side.
What did you learn from?
So that's a huge part of what we talk. In fact, it's in the name, precision business strategy,
and what you changed into what you're doing.
So everything from tax strategy and tax planning to accounting, financial planning, and analysis really came out of that. All of it revolves around what I do now. There's a way to do things. There's revolves around strategy. Is there a strategic way for us to forward planning to meet and or beat whatever goal that we established? Have enough strategy or planning going into it on the front end, and certainly didn't have enough strategy or not execution side. Strategic. So that's a huge part of what we would have changed the messaging in terms of who we were targeting and going after. So everything from tax strategy and tax planning to accounting, financial planning and analysis, and places where those particular individuals were. There's a way to do things. There's a status quo. We would have set our presentations to be more KPI and goal focused as opposed to we talking through some beautiful concepts. And so even with EYP, whether it really get at deliverables, fairly successful company or not, all of it. I think from a strategic perspective, we would have changed the messaging in terms of who we were targeting and going after.
On the Excel sheet.
We would have one of my friends, Darius, enhanced our marketing. He's seen a lot of these, our marketing efforts failures. And even when I was starting be in places where those let me guess, you got an Excel model. And then we would have presented we would have set our presentations to be more KPI and goal focused as opposed to
that's a big part of
through
what we
some
do.
beautiful concepts.
And so
that just
all the old guys say that
to really get at deliverables. And so strategy, I think, underlies all of it.
Isn't it amazing how we're all like number goals on the Excel sheet? Certain amount of employees, certain amount of customers. We're always successful on the Excel sheets.
Yeah, absolutely. Not so much one of my certain number of customers. Well, actually, the way we have a lot of these, we'll know a lot of these customer base. And even when I was starting, one of our goals, and we talked first thing you said was, let me guess, you got an Excel June 30 coming up, right? 23. Our firm should do just shy of $2 million in revenue. And that's going to take an extreme level of growth
in real estate and investment.
But just in our short existence, our short amount of time to cross the $1 million mark is going to be one thing. But we want to get as close to that $2 million mark as we possibly can.
So what are some of your goals?
Big, hairy, audacious goals.
Like what are some of, do you have like number goals? Certain amount of employees, certain amount of customers, certain amount of revenue
in terms of how we do our brand. Yeah, and I've shared this candidly with so much a certain number. We have an accounting. Well, actually, the way we have the model, no one in our firm knows what the customer base needs to be to get here. That will do some contract work with. One of our goals, and we talked about, but in terms of our core staff, no one has that CPA designation this summer around. That doesn't mean we're not rock star accountants, and it doesn't mean we're not really good in our June 30 coming up. And so, just from a brand perspective, I do want to just change the fabric of that a little bit, and that's going to take an extreme level to where other accountants who have been in this industry just in our short
don't feel like
existence,
they're
our short
limited
amount
in
of
terms
time
of
to
growth
cross
because
the
they don't have a
$1 million
particular
mark is
title
going to
or
be
title
one
or
thing,
designation.
but we want to get
And
as close to
before
that
other
$2 million
CPAs who
mark
watch
as we
the show kind of
possibly
jump on me
can.
and talk about
So
the
it's definitely
value
one
of
of
the
our
credentials. We
one
don't
of our
downplay that at
what do you
all. We
call
know
it,
what the
those
CPA
B
credential
hats,
is,
big hairy
but it's
Yeah,
also
yeah.
not the only thing that you
in
need
terms of
in order
getting
to be
there.
successful
But
as an
then
accountant
also
here.
from a
What would you
positioning
say are some of
perspective in
the
terms of how we do our
successful
brand,
traits that you
and I've
have
shared
and that
this
your
candidly
team
with
has
quite a few
that
folks. We
isn't
have an
that
accounting firm,
designation?
but
No one in our firm
I'd
is a
say it comes
CPA.
back to the
We
analysis
have some
side and the
CPAs that will
strategy
do
side.
some
What we
contract
see
work with, and we
typically
may
is
sub some
that
things out to,
there's
but
this
in
black
terms of
and
our
white
core
way of doing
staff,
things.
no one has that
This
CPA
particular thing
designation.
happens, check
But
the
that
box
doesn't mean
here,
we're
and
not
then
rock
it
star
goes out the
accountants, and
door.
it doesn't mean
Where
we're not really good
where
in
we
our
are
space.
challenging
And
and
so just
asking
from a
questions,
brand
and we're
perspective,
actually
I
playing
do
the role
want
of a
to
partner
change the
alongside
fabric
the
of that
business
a
owner.
little bit, not
And
partner
open
in,
up
in
an
the formal
avenue
sense
to
of ownership,
where
but partner
other
in the formal
accountants who
sense
have
of a
been in this
common goal.
industry
Don't feel like they're
there's an
limited in
expense that
terms of
happens. It's
growth
a
because they
fairly
don't
large
have a
expense.
particular title.
Most folks would say, "Hey, tell me what this
And
expense is.
before
Let me put
other
it in the right
CPAs who
category."
watch the show
Where our
kind of jump on me
conversations
and
are
talk about the
perfect. You did
value
this
of the credentials,
expense.
we don't
Did you
downplay
not
that
see
at
the
all. We
cash
know
flow
what the
statement
CPA
that we
credential is,
gave you?
but it's also
Because this
not
expense
the only thing
is
that
not
you need
actually
in order to
accounted
be
for in there.
successful
And
as an
let's talk
accountant
about what
here.
the ROI is.
What would you
If we
say are
spend
some of
money in
the
this
successful
particular area,
traits that
do
you
we
have
expect a
and that
return on that
your team
investment? And how
has
do we
that
measure
isn't
it?
that
And so we
designation?
become a little bit of an accountability
And
partner
I'd say
for
it comes
them.
back to the
But
analysis
ultimately, we're
side
working
and the
towards
strategy side.
a singular
What we
goal.
see typically
Financial
is that
visibility.
there's
to make
black and
better
white
business
way of
and
doing
tax
things.
decisions. This
And see, that
particular thing
sounds more like
happens, check the
consultant.
box here, and then it goes out the
Yep.
door.
Yep.
Where
That just so happens to
we
be
are
good at
challenging
accounting.
and asking
Yeah.
questions, and we're
That's very
actually
good.
playing the role of a
Well, how
partner
do people get in touch
alongside the
with you?
business owner.
I don't want to forget before
Not
the end.
partner in the formal sense
Yeah,
of ownership, but
absolutely.
partner in the
So
formal sense of a
visit our
common goal.
website. So it's PB.
There's an
peanut
expense
butter,
that happens. It's a
PB
fairly large expense.
Most folks would say, "Hey,
and there's
tell
a
me what this
very
expense
bright
is.
blue
Let me
button
put
at
it
the
in the
top
right
that says become a
category."
client,
Where
and
our
that's where they can
conversations
schedule a
are
discovery
perfect.
call
You did this
to
expense.
sit down and talk
Did
with
you not
someone
see
on our
the cash
team
flow statement
to
that
learn a
we
little bit more
gave
about
you?
their business,
Because this
learn a little
expense
bit more about
is
what
not
we
actually
do,
accounted
and
for
see
in
if it
there.
makes
And
sense for
let's
us to
talk
work
about what the
together.
ROI is.
Cool.
If we
Do you
spend
do
money
any
in this
sort of like personal
particular
development,
area,
like the reading
do we
and the
expect a
videos
return
and
on that
the stuff
investment?
that you
And
listen to?
how do we
What do you
measure
feed
it?
your mind
And
with?
so we become a little bit of an
Yeah,
accountability partner for
a
them,
ton of different
but
things.
ultimately
And so
we're
I've
working
kind of
towards
got this
a
small
singular goal.
playlist of
Financial visibility
motivational items
to make
and
better
so
business and tax
two
decisions.
people really resonate
And see,
on,
that sounds
really
more like
come
a
through a lot
consultant.
on there. Eric Thomas is one, and
Yep.
Les Brown
That
is
just so
another.
happens to be
And
good
in
at
fact,
accounting.
I would flip that
Yeah.
and say in a
That's very
preferred
good.
order: Les Brown one,
That's
Eric
very, very
Thomas the
good.
second. Les
Well, how do
Brown
people
has
get
been a
in touch with you?
motivational speaker
I don't want to
for
forget before the end.
years. And I don't
Yeah,
so much as
absolutely.
listen to
So,
his
visit our
newer talks.
website. So
I go
it's
back to the
PB,
talks that are
peanut butter,
from like
PB,
the
dash
80s, the
strategies
90s,
dot
those
com.
kind of talks.
And there's
Man,
a very
what
bright
he
blue button
speaks
at the
about
top that says become
I
a
don't even know
client.
how
And
to
that's where
explain
they
it,
can
but it's
schedule
one
a
of those
discovery
moments where
call
when you sit and
to
listen,
sit
it
down
kind
and
of
talk with
sends that
someone on our
shiver through
team
your body
to
and
learn a little bit more
it's
about
kind
their
of touches
business,
you in
learn a little
that
bit
sense.
more
And
about
so
what we do.
I love
and
to
see
keep
if
the
it makes
mind
sense for us
sharp.
to
I
work
love
together.
to keep
Cool.
it
Let's talk
towards
about
the
some of
next thing,
your,
right? Motivation, and
do
not
you
really
do any
get
sort
so
of like
down or so
personal
drawn
development,
in
like the
on the
reading
bad
and the
things that are
videos and
happening.
the stuff
Even
that
when
you
those
listen
things do
to? What do you
happen,
feed your mind
kind of
with?
sully in it for a little bit, and then I turn right around and say,
a
okay,
ton
how
of
can we
different
drive
things.
it
And so I've
and
kind
make
of
it
got
better?
this
So tons of
small
motivational things
playlist
there. I
of
also listen
motivational
to
items.
music,
And so
that
two
really
people
talks
really
about kind of
resonate
the
on
high level
really come
success
through a lot on
kind
there.
of things.
Eric Thomas
So
is
I try
one,
to keep it
and Les
positive in
Brown
that
is
sense.
another.
And in
You know, I
fact,
actually
I
interviewed
would
Les
flip that
Brown
and say
when I
in
lived
a
in Las
preferred
Vegas
order: Les Brown one, Eric
before
Thomas the second.
podcasts.
Les
We called
Brown
it
has been a
internet radio.
motivational speaker
I mean, I
for
guess there technically
years.
were
And I don't
podcasts.
so
This
much
was
as
like
listen
11,
to
12 years ago.
his newer
I
talks.
guess there
I go
technically
back
were,
to
but
the
nobody
talks
was
that
doing
are from like
podcasts.
the
YouTube wasn't even
80s, the
there
90s,
yet. I
those
got
kind
him
of
in the
talks.
studio. I was involved with some
Man,
multi-level marketing guys,
what
and they had
he
brought him in to
speaks about,
speak. And one of
I
the
don't
guys
know
was like, hey,
I don't
you
even
wanna
know
have
how to
Les
explain it,
Brown
but it's
on? I
one
was
of
like,
those moments where
yeah,
when you
that-
sit and
that sounds
listen, it kind of
great.
sends that
So he
shiver through
came
your
in
body,
and
and
very
I
gracious.
know
He was
it
a
just kind
wonderful
of
guy.
touches you in
Last
that sense.
summer,
And so I love to
I was
keep
at
the
an
mind
event
sharp.
that
I
I was
love
given a
to keep
presentation
it.
towards,
And I did not know that Les
the next
Brown was
thing,
the
right?
keynote. They
Motivation
kept that
and not
part
really
hidden.
get so down
And
or
so
so
I
drawn
did my
in
presentation
on the
on
on the
a
bad
couple
things
of
that are happening.
presentations after mine.
Even
We
when those
find
things
out
do
that
happen,
Les Brown
kind of
is
sully
there,
in it for
and
a
Les
little bit,
Brown
and
is
then I
about to
turn
give
right
the
around and say,
keynote.
okay, how can we drive it
We
and
break.
make it better? So
We
tons
go
of
out to the
motivational things
halls.
there.
I am
I also
shoulder to
listen
shoulder
to
with Les.
music
I'm like,
I'm here and he's here.
really talks
And
about
everything in me is saying, ask the man to take
kind
a
of the
picture,
high
ask
level
him to take a
success
picture,
kind of
ask him,
kind of
and then I
things.
didn't do it.
So I try to keep it positive in that
Didn't do
sense.
it. I
That's
walk
good.
in and
You know, I
my
actually
seat where I
interviewed
was
Les
sitting, Les
Brown
is one seat ahead of
when
me.
I lived in Las
I'm like,
Vegas.
tap the man on the shoulder to ask
Is
him for a picture.
before
It's okay, just ask him for a
podcasts.
picture. And I didn't do
We
it.
called it internet radio.
Talk about a big
I mean, I guess
regret
there
and not
technically
having
were
just enough
podcasts. This
confidence to
was,
say,
like 11, 12
Les,
years
you one of
ago.
my heroes.
I guess there
been listening to
technically
your
were,
stuff
but nobody was
forever.
doing podcasts.
Can I get a picture?
YouTube wasn't even
Don't have
there
a picture
yet.
with Les Brown. And
And
I was
so
shoulder to shoulder with the guy.
we I got him in the studio. I
I feel
was
your
involved
pain
with
there.
some
I didn't
multi-level
keep the
marketing guys,
recordings.
and they had brought him in to speak.
It was back when,
and
one of
like
the
I
guys
said,
was
nobody
like,
was
"Hey, you
doing
wanna have
podcast. We
Les
didn't think
Brown
it was
on? I was
that great. Yeah. The final question I like to ask everybody. So imagine with me for a minute that this is the last time anybody's going to see you. This is your last appearance, last time. And everyone in the world is going to watch this podcast and get to hear your message. So what message do you have to leave to the world?
I have 3 phrases that I think the world should take heed in. Number 1 is dream big, and dream big unapologetically. Don't limit yourself to what you currently have in terms of resources. Don't limit yourself into what you've seen other people attain. Dream entirely big and go after it relentlessly. Dream big, take action. Be you unapologetically. Take action, go out there and go for whatever it is that you want. And be you is the last part of that sentence. Be you unapologetically. In a world full of filters, in a world full of everyone trying to be something that they're not, how dope is it and how awesome is it for you to just be you?
That is a dope message. Larry West, thank you for coming on the High Performance Podcast. For me, Alex Alexander, be high performer.